Hey guys, welcome to video number 4 for chapter 33. In this one, we're going to be talking about the emergence of new imperial powers. Up until this point, we pretty much just talked about Europe, and with good reason. European powers who were going out there and conquering all over the place, especially Great Britain, but they weren't the only ones that wanted in on the fun. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Japan and the U.S. All right, they were the two major industrial powers outside of Europe in the 19th and into the 20th century. So let's talk about U.S. imperialism first. Now, what's important and interesting to remember is that the United States exists because of European imperialism. Great Britain goes over and conquers and takes areas in North America as colonies. That eventually becomes the U.S. So we kind of inherited this cultural legacy of imperialism, and it was passed down to us. While it's not generally regarded as imperialism in older U.S. history textbooks, the entire notion of manifest destiny absolutely is imperialism. Excuse me. Keep on moving forward and conquering and taking other lands. Ask the Native Americans if they think that that's imperialism. So it's definitely a part of our cultural DNA. It's definitely a part of our history. Now, where it really started, to form this U.S. imperialism and formalize was with the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was a proclamation issued by President James Monroe, hence the name, and it warned Europe against further imperialism in the Americas. It essentially made the U.S. the watchdog of the Western Hemisphere. Now, the U.S. started to look beyond its continental borders, most notably with Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska we bought from Russia in 1867, and we made Hawaii a protectorate in 1875, mostly for the lucrative sugar plantations out there. The last Hawaiian queen was overthrown in 1893, and the islands were officially annexed as U.S. territory in 1898. Now, even more territory was acquired after the Spanish-American War. Now, you'll learn more about this war next year. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with it now, but for now, just know that the U.S. gained former Spanish territories, Puerto Rico, Cuba for a little while. We didn't hold on to that for that long, and then Guam and the Philippines. All right, now, Puerto Rico and Guam are still currently U.S. territories. The Philippines, though, is a very valuable territory for the U.S. We kind of granted it its full independence after World War II, but for a little while, that was the big port for us in the Pacific. It allowed us to facilitate travel and communication between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Now, we also sought to build a canal in Central America, and this was the Panama Canal. Now, Panama today is the most narrow point in Central America, and as you see by the map here on the left, it has numerous natural waterways, making it an ideal spot to build a canal. The problem, though, was at the time, Panama was still a part of Colombia, so the U.S. decided to throw its support behind a rebellion against Colombia to break away and become independent, and this independence movement eventually created the nation of Panama. And in return, the new country granted the U.S. rights to build a canal. Now, the canal had tremendous impact on decreasing travel time from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I mean, you can see here in the map. Let me just move this up so you can fully see the numbers here. All right, to get from New York City around Cape Horn to San Francisco, it's about 13,000 miles. Cutting through the Panama Canal, 5,200. So obviously that is a huge change, a huge improvement in travel times, both for trade and for communication. Now, let's move on talking about Japan. Now, Japan, the main thing that got Japan going on imperialism was industrialization. Japan had quickly turned itself into industrial power during the Meiji era, but it resented those unequal treaties that were imposed upon them by the U.S. and Europe, the same way that they were imposed upon China. Remember, those were imposed at the end of the Tokugawa period. They also needed way more natural resources than the relatively small nation of Japan could supply, as well as land to expand into as their population boomed. Right, you look on the map, here's Japan here, okay, the red islands over to the right. It's not that big. And as the population went up and, as I said, there's not a lot in the way of natural resources for industrialization, they felt that they had to expand outwards. They turned their attention first to Korea. All right, so here's the Korean peninsula right there, closest land bridge to Japan and Asia. Japanese businesses had a significant interest in Korea, but a rebellion broke out in 1893, and the Qing government sent in troops to reassert Chinese control. To prevent this from happening, Japan declared war on China, and this was known as the Sino-Japanese War in 1894. The industrialized Japanese Navy demolished Chinese fleet. China, this was another very humiliating defeat for China, similar to the Opium Wars, and it pushed China's forces out of Korea. Korea officially gained its independence from China, but in doing so became a dependency of Japan. Japan also gained unequal trading rights with China, similar to what the Western nations had done, and this victory for Japan made Russia very uneasy, since both had their eyes not only on Korea, but also in this region up here, Manchuria. This was a region very, very rich in natural resources, especially coal and iron. So eventually war is going to break out between them. Now here's a picture from the Sino-Japanese War, and that is the Russo-Japanese War. And this was similar results as what we saw in the Sino-Japanese War. Japan won full control over the Korean peninsula, southern Manchuria, and Russia was humiliated for losing against a non-European power. Japan was now officially a major imperial power. And as you can see from the map, what we'll get into in a couple of chapters is by the 1930s and 40s, it would really go out there and assert their dominance over the Pacific. And by this point, we're into the midst of World War II. Okay, so pretty quick video just talking about newer imperial powers. And then in the next one, we'll wrap things up for chapter 33, talking about the legacies of imperialism.